I knew something was wrong the moment I pulled into the driveway and saw my two kids sitting on the front steps with their backpacks and a half-eaten pack of Oreos between them. It was a hot afternoon, sun boiling off the concrete, and there was this weird silence in the air, not the usual hum of video games blasting from the living room or the clatter of my daughter's rollerblades on the porch. Just two kids. Sitting. Waiting. My son looked up and said, flatly, "Karen kicked us out." I blinked. What? She said we can't stay in our rooms anymore. Said her cousins needed the space. My daughter chimed in, all bravado trying to mask the tears in her eyes. She threw our clothes in garbage bags and said we could sleep in the garage if we wanted. It took me 3 seconds to process what I was hearing, and then something in my brain just snapped. I threw the car into park and stormed up the steps so fast I nearly tripped on my own feet. I pushed the front door open, and immediately, I was hit with the smell of incense, something vaguely lavender and aggressively artificial, mixed with the unmistakable scent of burning something in the kitchen. Probably kale chips again. She was always burning kale chips. Karen stood in the hallway, barefoot, wearing some sort of flowing robe situation and holding a mason jar of green sludge. She turned to me with that smug half-smile she always wore when she thought she was winning. "Oh," she said, like she hadn't just displaced my children from their own home, "you're back early." I didn't even answer that. I looked past her, and sure enough, down the hall, the kids' bedroom doors were wide open. Inside, everything was different. Posters gone. Bed stripped. My son's Lego shelves had been taken down, and in their place, a pile of duffel bags and a pair of sneakers that definitely didn't belong to my children. I turned back to her, fists clenched, trying to stay calm. "What the hell is going on?" Karen sipped her drink. "I told you last week that my cousins were flying in. They had nowhere else to stay. Your kids are young, they'll adjust. They can turn the garage into a cool hangout spot or something. Very Stranger Things." "You kicked my kids out of their rooms," I said slowly, emphasizing every syllable. "And put strangers in their beds." "Family," she corrected. "They're my blood. My support system. Energy alignment is very important, you know. And your kid's energy was," she made a vague fluttering motion with her hand. "Too chaotic." I stared at her like she had sprouted a second head. "They're children, Karen. In their own house. You don't get to just evict them." "I didn't evict them," she said, rolling her eyes. "I redirected their energy. It's temporary. Besides, you said I could stay here. You offered. I offered you the guest room. For 3 weeks. That was 2 months ago. And I've made improvements," she said, gesturing dramatically to the hallway. "I rearranged the pantry, did a sage cleanse, cleared out all that processed junk from the kitchen. And I've been very low impact. I even changed the bathroom rotation schedule so your daughter doesn't hog it every morning." I took a step forward. "Put the kids' stuff back. Right now." She raised her eyebrows. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said. "I'm telling you to undo what you just did." Karen let out a theatrical sigh and set her mason jar down on the hallway table. "I knew this would happen. I knew you'd react like this. Look, your energy's clearly very volatile right now, and I don't want that in the house. So if you're going to yell, maybe you should go cool off somewhere else." My jaw dropped. "You're kicking me out now?" "I'm suggesting a recalibration," she said, folding her arms. "For everyone's sake. I've been holding space here for weeks. It's exhausting. I deserve a little respect." Just then, a guy in a sleeveless hoodie came out of the kids' room holding a box of my daughter's art supplies. He looked about 25, smelled faintly of weed and Axe body spray, and had "Defy" tattooed across his neck. "Yo, Karen, where you want these markers?" he asked, looking around like he was in an Airbnb. "In the top drawer," she said sweetly, then turned back to me. Isn't it great? They're going to start a mural. Very communal. Uplifting. I didn't say a word. I walked back outside, past my children, past the welcome mat she had replaced with one that said, Namaste or go away, and I sat on the porch steps, trying to remember how we even got here. It started simply. Karen was a cousin of my late wife, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. She reached out of the blue, said she was between jobs, between apartments, between energies, whatever that meant, and just needed a place to land. For a couple weeks. And she was family. Or used to be. I'd been trying to hold it together since the funeral. Being a single parent wasn't easy, and the idea of having another adult in the house, even a mildly irritating one, sounded better than silence. For a while, she was fine. She cooked. She helped pick up the kids. She brought home weird tea blends and talked about healing our root chakras. But then came the little things. The passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. The thermostat mysteriously changing to eco mode at night. The way she'd call my parenting reactionary and say my son wasn't aligned with his masculine softness. I ignored it. I wanted peace. And I was tired. Now my children were outside like strangers on their own property, and I had no idea how to fix it without screaming or throwing her herbal shampoo bottles into the street. I looked at my kids, my daughter, fidgeting with the zipper on her hoodie, and my son quietly stacking Oreos into a tower, and I felt something click in my chest. A decision. I stood back up, walked into the house again. Karen was on the couch now, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I'm giving you 20 minutes to get your cousins out of my kids' room and put everything back where it belongs, I said firmly. Or I'm calling the police. Karen blinked up at me. On me? Yes. On you. She let out a laugh like I'd just told her aliens were landing in the backyard. Oh, honey, you can't do that. I've been living here for over 30 days. I have tenant rights. I felt my stomach drop. She saw it. She smiled. Yup, she said, stretching luxuriously. Look it up. Can't kick me out without a formal eviction. So maybe watch how you talk to me. And maybe consider apologizing. I'm feeling very uncentered right now. You think you can just take over my house? I think, she said, picking up her green drink again, that the universe brought me here for a reason. And if you weren't so emotionally constipated, maybe you'd see that. Then she pulled out her phone again, eyes gleaming. Maybe I should call the police, she murmured. Tell them you're threatening a single woman with children in the house. Maybe even say you've been hostile lately. I have been keeping notes. You're lying. She looked up and smiled. Try me. I stood frozen, hands trembling, not from fear, but rage. She wasn't just delusional. She had a plan. And I had walked right into it. Behind me, I heard my son's voice again. Quiet. Dad? I turned. Can we just go somewhere else tonight? Like grandma's? I don't want to be here. That was it. That was the moment. I nodded slowly, forcing the fury back down into my chest. Yeah, I said. We'll go. Karen smirked, triumphant. But in my mind, a new voice was forming. One that wasn't tired. One that wasn't polite. One that was done playing house with a parasite. I smiled back at her. Not warmly. Not kindly. Just enough to make her uneasy. Enjoy it while it lasts, I said. And then I walked out, gathered my kids, and started planning her exit. Because if Karen wanted war, she had just chosen the wrong house. We spent the night at my sister's place, 1 bedroom, 2 air mattresses, and a cat with trust issues. My daughter cried herself to sleep after trying to make sense of what had happened. My son just lay there, staring at the ceiling with his headphones in, pretending it didn't matter. But I knew better. They'd been blindsided, and the pain wasn't just about losing a room, it was about being displaced, like they didn't belong in their own lives anymore. That kind of wound cuts deep, especially for kids. I barely slept. I kept replaying Karen's smug little smile, the way she twisted the law like a toy she'd just unwrapped, wielding it with zero understanding of the lives she was wrecking. The audacity wasn't just astonishing, it was surgical. She'd timed her invasion perfectly. 30 days under one roof, and now she had a flimsy shield of tenant protection to hide behind, even if she was never on a lease, never paid a dime of rent, never even bought her own toilet paper. The next morning, I drove the kids to school. They didn't ask if we were going home afterward. That told me everything I needed to know. I stopped by the house alone later that morning, mostly to collect a few things, clothes, medicine, my work laptop, but also to see what damage had already been done. I parked across the street, just watching for a minute. The blinds were closed on every window except one, where I could just make out the profile of one of her cousins, Alpha Kev. I'd started calling him in my head, sitting in my son's desk chair, gaming with his feet up on the wall. It made my blood boil. When I walked in, I was hit by the same cloud of lavender incense and chaos. There were shoes everywhere, none of them mine. Someone had moved my coffee machine. The couch cushions were turned inside out like someone was looking for spare change. It wasn't just invasion, it was erasure. Karen floated into the room wearing a face mask made of honey and something green. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. "Oh, hey," she said casually, like I hadn't fled my own house the night before. Just in time to help me carry in some groceries. "I got oat milk and those gluten-free pizza things your daughter likes." "You mean the ones you said were toxic capitalism snacks a week ago?" I asked, voice flat. She smiled. Growth. I ignored her and headed straight to the hallway. My son's door was locked. I jiggled the handle, then knocked. A pause. Then Kev's voice, muffled and annoyed, "Yo, someone's at the door." "It's my house," I said through the wood. Karen appeared behind me, arms folded, the honey mask cracking slightly as she frowned. I told them to lock the doors. For their safety. "You came in kind of aggressive last time." "That was Rich. I came in furious because you evicted my children." "Don't be dramatic." They weren't evicted. They were relocated. Temporarily. In a garage that has black mold and no heat. They're kids. They're adaptable. I turned to her. "You have until the end of the day to undo this. Or I start the formal eviction process." Her expression didn't even twitch. "You know that takes 60 days, right? Plus a court date, plus process servers, plus all kinds of documentation. And any harassment in the meantime? I can file a restraining order." I stared at her. "You'd lie under oath?" She placed a hand on her chest like I'd accused her of kicking puppies. "Of course not. But perception is reality. And you've been very unstable lately. I've kept a journal. Documented everything. You're out of your mind." She took a deep breath, as if I were the one inconveniencing her. "I'm trying to maintain a healing environment, and you're bringing in this heavy, negative energy. It's not good for my alignment. Or the cousin's integration process." "Integration process?" I asked, incredulous. "They just got out of a tough living situation," she said solemnly. "They need peace. Structure. Routine. In my kids' beds." She didn't even blink. "They were unused during the day. We're just reassigning resources more efficiently." That was it. I couldn't listen to another word. I left before I said something I'd regret. I got into my car, slammed the door, and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing hard. There had to be a way to fix this. I just didn't know what it was yet. That afternoon, I called a lawyer, well, technically a former college roommate who now practiced family law. He was just as stunned as I was when I explained the situation. "She's asserting squatters' rights?" he asked, incredulous. "Tenant rights," I corrected. "Because she's been here over 30 days. Was there a lease?" "No." "Any rent payments?" "Not a cent." "Utilities in her name?" "Don't be ridiculous." He sighed. "Okay, well, she's technically not a tenant without a lease or payment record, but judges can get weird about this kind of thing if she's been living there that long. You'll probably have to do a formal eviction anyway." "How long?" "Minimum 30 to 60 days. And you'll need to serve papers, prove ownership, maybe appear in court. It's slow." "What if she trashes the place?" "Document everything. Photos. Video. Receipts. And don't engage. She'll use anything you say against you." I hung up feeling sick. I'd opened my home to someone I barely knew out of kindness, and now she was threatening to turn my life into a courtroom circus. It was like offering someone a glass of water and having them steal the faucet. The next few days were hell. Karen didn't just dig in, she started acting like she owned the place. She held a crystal sound bath ceremony in the living room on Wednesday night with 5 people I'd never seen before. The incense set off the smoke detector, and she called me oppressive for turning off the breaker to stop it. On Thursday, she replaced the family photos in the hallway with framed printouts of moon phases and quotes like, "Embrace the chaos within." I found my wedding photo shoved behind the washing machine, covered in dust and dryer lint. By Friday, she had moved a full-length mirror into the kitchen and set up a meditation corner with cushions and gongs. I tripped over it trying to get milk. I was slowly losing my mind. Every time I returned to grab something from the house, she was there with a new excuse, a new spiritual justification for her freeloading. And those cousins, don't get me started. They'd commandeered the living room for late-night card games and took showers so long the water heater never recovered. They acted like they were at a vacation rental hosted by a dad with no backbone. But I did have a backbone. And it was starting to stiffen. I began documenting everything. Not for revenge. Not yet. But for protection. Photos of the changes. Videos of the house. Recordings of her bizarre rules and passive-aggressive lectures. I kept calm. I stayed polite. But inside, I was slowly preparing for a fight. The breaking point came a week later. I stopped by to pick up my daughter's sketchbooks. She had an art competition coming up and hadn't been able to finish her entry. I knocked, waited, and when no one answered, I used my key. The door was stuck, something behind it. When I finally pushed it open, I saw that Karen had put up a table in the entryway. Just casually blocked the door with a makeshift altar, candles, sage bundles, a bowl of polished rocks, and a sign that said, "Please remove your ego before entering." As I navigated around it, Karen appeared again, barefoot, holding a singing bowl. "You can't just barge in here," she said. "It's my house," I said. "It's a shared space," she corrected. "And there are boundaries. Spiritual ones. I'm here to grab my daughter's sketchbook. That's it." She followed me like a shadow as I went to the kids' room, the cousin's room. It reeked of body spray and takeout. I found the sketchbook in a bin under the bed and turned to leave. Karen stood in the hallway with her arms crossed. "You've been very aggressive this week." "I've been patient." "You've been threatening. And that's not okay." "I've spoken with a friend who does legal energy work, and she said I might need to file something soon." "You do what you need to do," I said, brushing past her. But as I walked away, she muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "People like you don't appreciate the gifts they're given." I stopped. Slowly turned around. What did you just say? She didn't back down. You needed help. You were drowning. And I brought order, calm. Your kids were out of control. You should be thanking me. My voice was low. You threw my kids out of their rooms. I elevated the household, she said. You're just too stuck in your ways to see it. That night, I sat with my sister and the kids and explained what was happening. I told them I was working on getting her out, legally, and that it would take time. My son asked, so, she wins for now? I looked him in the eye. No. She thinks she's winning. But she's just digging her own grave. He gave a small smile. My daughter asked if we could go get donuts in the morning. I said absolutely. I tucked them in on the pull-out couch, kissed their foreheads, and then stayed up another few hours planning my next move. Karen thought she'd found a loophole. That I'd just roll over and let her keep the house while my children lived like guests in their own lives. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The first real shift came when I stopped reacting and started preparing. That meant no more arguing in the hallway, no more storming through the front door demanding justice. Karen thrived on conflict. Every raised voice was another twisted entry in whatever delusional journal she was keeping. So I changed the tempo. Quiet. Calculated. Purposeful. My lawyer friend advised me to file for a formal eviction. I filed the paperwork that Friday. I also installed a security camera facing the front porch, not to catch anything illegal, but to protect myself in case Karen decided to fabricate something, which, frankly, felt inevitable. She noticed it immediately. That afternoon, I got a text, "Wow. Paranoia is such a toxic trait. Hope your ego enjoys the footage." I didn't reply. Meanwhile, I started reclaiming the house 1 inch at a time. I went in during the day when I knew she was out leading her weekly chakra group at the community center and collected any belongings she hadn't touched. I boxed up the kids' school supplies and favorite books. I gathered old photo albums and heirlooms from the attic. I even took the microwave. She'd mocked me for keeping it anyway, claiming it scrambled molecular integrity. Fine. Let her eat cold tofu. Each time I left, I locked the garage from the inside, where Karen had refused to let my son sleep, by the way, claiming it offended the energy grid. Ironically, she'd since used it to store half of her junk. But I didn't touch any of her things. I was careful. Deliberate. Everything in my hands had my name on it. Over the course of a week, I transitioned from reactionary dad to tactician. I started gathering testimonies, from neighbors who'd seen her screaming at the mailman for carrying invasive energy, and from the delivery guy she accused of stalking her vibrations because he brought the wrong salad 3 times. Most were eager to talk. Apparently, Karen had made an impression. The kids noticed the change, too. At my sister's, their moods lightened. My daughter began drawing again. My son started teasing her like he used to. No one mentioned the word home, but it hovered there, like a promise we'd make good on. Karen, meanwhile, kept up her performance. She'd begun referring to herself as the temporary matriarch of the house. She left daily notes in the kitchen, reminders that our energetic imbalance was hurting the cousins' digestion. One day, I found a note taped to the thermostat that read, "Please stop lowering the temperature. The house is entering a freeze of emotional repression." I didn't laugh. I documented it. Things escalated again when I arrived one morning to find the locks changed. I stood on the porch for a full minute, key in hand, turning it uselessly against the deadbolt. At first, I thought it was stuck. Then it clicked, literally. She'd had the locks replaced. My hands trembled. For a second, I considered kicking the door in. But instead, I called the police. They showed up 20 minutes later. 2 officers, one older, one younger, both professional but clearly unimpressed with what I told them. She's claiming she's a tenant, I explained calmly. She's not on the lease. She hasn't paid rent. I filed for eviction already. The younger cop asked, "You have proof she changed the locks?" I held up my key. "This one's worked since I moved in." "Now it doesn't." "I didn't authorize a lock change." They knocked. Karen answered in a silk robe and head wrap, holding a mug that said, "Which, please?" "Officers," she said with a sweet smile, "I was just saging the entryway." They asked her a few questions. She launched into a dramatic monologue about feeling unsafe, how I'd invaded her aura and made her cousins feel spiritually homeless. She spoke in circles, peppering every sentence with words like resonance and soul alignment. I kept quiet. I didn't even look at her. Just stared at the doorknob. Eventually, the older officer pulled me aside. "We can't force her to open the door, not right now. But she's skating on thin ice." "You filed eviction?" "Yes." "Good. Document everything. Don't touch her stuff. Don't try to re-enter. Let it go through the courts. But if she blocks access to anything that's legally yours, mail, bills, etc., call us again." I nodded. I was angry, but I wasn't surprised. She knew how to dance on the edge of legality without toppling over. Still, that lock stunt turned something in my gut. She wasn't just freeloading anymore. She was building a fantasy. One where she was the owner, the leader, the queen of some makeshift commune she had conjured out of my grief and hesitation. So I adapted again. I filed an emergency request to expedite the eviction. Cited endangerment of minor property, unauthorized lock changes, and refusal of property access. It wasn't guaranteed, but it was movement. That same weekend, I got a text from her cousin, Kevin. Or Kev, as he insisted people call him, despite being 29 with a failed Twitch channel and a pet snake named Prophet. His message was simple: "Hey bro. Can you bring snacks? We out." I stared at the screen for a full minute, unsure if it was a joke or some warped test. Then I replied, "Sure. I'll bring you a lifetime supply of boundaries." Then I blocked his number. The next few days passed in a blur of tension. Karen grew more brazen. She began telling people she was renovating the house. I heard she told one neighbor she was considering converting the basement into a mindfulness dungeon. I didn't even want to know what that meant. Finally, the court gave me a date, 2 weeks from now. That's when the eviction would be official, enforced if necessary. I felt relief, but it was fragile. Time was still on her side, and I didn't trust her to behave. That night, I received a call from my neighbor, Rick. He's the guy who's always mowing his lawn at dawn like it's a military drill. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Thought you should know, there's some kind of party happening at your place. Loud music. Weird chanting. And someone's setting off fireworks. In the yard." Of course they were. I drove over. Parked a block away. Approached the house on foot, heart pounding. There were voices inside. Drums. Laughter. And a window open, one that Karen had probably forgotten about. I crept closer and peered inside. They were having a full-on ceremony. Karen sat cross-legged on my coffee table, waving around what looked like a giant feather, while Kev and the other cousin wore cloaks, literal cloaks, and were dancing in slow, interpretive circles. My son's old soccer ball was being used as part of a centerpiece of grounding energy. Someone had drawn symbols all over the walls in marker. I stepped back, disgusted. It was over. I was done. I walked away, drove back to my sister's, and started drafting a written complaint to accompany the court file: property destruction, unauthorized alterations, and health code violations. 3 days later, I was granted a temporary injunction to bar further modifications to the home. The notice would be posted on the door in 48 hours. Karen would be forced to stop. But fate beat me to it. Because that morning, when the official arrived to post the notice, Karen did something I hadn't predicted. She opened the door, read the paper, and laughed. Then, for reasons I still don't understand, she tore the document in half and threw it at the officer's face. She screamed about false structures of power and energy tyrants and then slammed the door shut. 2 hours later, the police returned. But this time, they had a warrant. Apparently, defacing a court document in front of an officer counts as contempt. Combine that with the lock change, property damage, and unauthorized occupants. That was enough. They knocked. Karen didn't answer. They knocked again. Still nothing. Then they entered. What followed wasn't loud or violent, it was just slow. Methodical. I watched from the sidewalk as they escorted Karen out in handcuffs. Her silk robe trailed behind her like a deflated flag. Her cousins followed, bewildered, carrying duffel bags and protest signs they hadn't even used. Karen turned back once, saw me, and said, "This house was never aligned." I said nothing. Just stood there, hands in my pockets, as she was loaded into the back of a cruiser. There was no cheering. No crowd. Just the quiet satisfaction of a long overdue consequence. And inside, past the shattered incense and ruined throw pillows, my house waited. Empty. Still. And finally, mine again. The silence in the house was eerie at first. After weeks of tension, incense, and chanting, the absence of noise felt almost unnatural. I stepped inside the day after Karen was removed, keys in hand, unsure whether to feel victorious or just exhausted. The air inside smelled like burnt sage, sour kale, and something else, something stale, like arrogance that had gone rancid. The first thing I did was walk to my daughter's old room. Her name was still written in chalk on the side of the bookshelf. The bed had been stripped bare, the mattress rolled up against the wall like it was trash. Her sketchbooks were gone again. I later found them jammed behind the dresser, folded and torn. My son's room was worse. His desk had been dragged into the hallway, scratched and missing a leg. Someone had taped a ripped poster of wolves howling at the moon over the closet door. It wasn't even straight. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, running a hand through my hair. It wasn't just mess, it was disrespect. Every inch of the house had been turned into something that reflected Karen's version of the world. The spiritual slogans, the feathers, the chaos pretending to be clarity. But beneath it all, my home was still there, buried under the wreckage. I didn't sleep at the house that first night. Instead, I picked the kids up from school and took them to dinner, an actual dinner. Burgers, fries, milkshakes. No vegan cheese. No quinoa. Just food that didn't try to lecture you. My daughter talked more than she had in weeks, telling me about a group project and how someone named Maya kept hogging the markers. My son laughed at her jokes, and somewhere between the fries and the chocolate shake, I realized something: we were still intact. Later that evening, we pulled up to the house. I unlocked the door, and for a moment, none of us moved. Then my daughter stepped inside, cautious. "Is she gone?" "She's gone," I said. "For good." They explored slowly, as if the house might bite. My son peeked into the kitchen and grimaced at the remnants of whatever weird diet Karen had been attempting. Did she seriously put chia seeds in the peanut butter? "Let's not talk about it," I replied. The kids didn't complain once while we worked together to start the cleanup. My daughter stripped her mattress and helped toss out the broken crystals Karen had glued to her windowsill. My son tried to patch the dent in the wall left by someone's boot. We laughed, we scrubbed, and by the end of the night, the place didn't feel quite so hollow anymore. It felt like ours again, even if only in fragments. Over the next week, I took time off work. We repainted the walls. I replaced the furniture that had been damaged or disappeared entirely. Turns out Karen sold a few things online when I wasn't looking. The police report helped, and thankfully, my insurance covered most of it. But what mattered more was the act itself. Every coat of paint, every rearranged shelf, it was all part of reclaiming something that had been stolen, piece by piece. People from the neighborhood began to come by. Some apologized for not stepping in. Others came just to satisfy their curiosity, but I didn't care. Let them peek. Karen had made us a spectacle, but I wouldn't let that define us. I spoke to them politely, accepted a few casseroles, and then returned to work inside. My sister came one afternoon with her kids. She hugged me longer than usual and looked around, clearly taking in the changes. "Feels like your house again," she said. "Getting there," I replied. The kids started sleeping in their own rooms again by the second week. My daughter insisted on decorating hers with glow-in-the-dark stars and new curtains. My son asked for a bookshelf, then immediately filled it with comic books. I didn't argue. I just watched them settle, root, reclaim what was always meant to be theirs. Karen never came back. A court order made it official. She was banned from the property. Any belongings she left behind were catalogued and boxed, then placed on the porch for pickup. She didn't show. After the legal window passed, I had the right to dispose of them. Most of it was junk. Essential oils, broken lamps, a box of handwritten manifestations that read like passive-aggressive poetry. I tossed them without ceremony. The cousins vanished just as quickly. From what I heard, they drifted off to another couch, another temporary setup. I didn't pursue it. I didn't need to. That chapter was over. A month later, the house felt whole again. Not perfect, not untouched, but lived in. Ours. The laughter returned. Dinner conversations didn't involve the words, toxic energy, or frequencies. My son asked if we could get a dog. My daughter started a painting of our family, with a little caption at the bottom that read, "Home again." And me? I finally slept through the night. There's something strange about winning a battle you never asked for. It doesn't feel like triumph, not exactly. It feels like breath. Like space. Like relief. I learned a lot during those weeks. About patience. About boundaries. About how quickly kindness can be weaponized if you don't know when to draw the line. But I also learned something else, something quieter. That the people you protect, the people you fight for, they see it. They remember it. And they carry it with them. One evening, my daughter handed me a note she'd written in school. It was simple. One line. "Thank you for not letting her win." I kept it. And sometimes, late at night, when the lights are off and the house is quiet, I walk through the hallway just to hear the silence. Not empty. Just peaceful. Exactly as a home should be. End.